third entry in the series, and maybe the most wheel spinning of the movies that I've seen so far. There are two movies that I either haven't seen or just don't remember seeing, and then one other movie that's not directly part of the canon, but stuff actually happens in that one. And that's not to say that nothing happens in Subspecies 3. I'm just saying not much happens in Subspecies 3. This feels like it ought to be the big slam bang ending of a trilogy. And then if you go on to do more movies, then, you know, you create a new trilogy. And maybe I'm just spoiled or at least influenced by Star Wars and the way that they've done it. But generally it's the cycle of three. There is something narratively fulfilling about that. And there's, you know, 3-story act structure and so forth. And I don't think that Subspecies 3 delivers on any of this. But so here's the idea. When last we left our heroes, Michelle and Becky, her sister, and Mel, the guy who worked at the embassy that there is a burgeoning relationship with Becky with, although they haven't acted on it. In Bloodstone, neither of them were making any moves, but there was a little bit of electricity, a little bit of chemistry, a little bit of heat. And in this movie, that is pushed more to the fore, and it's also one of the wasted opportunities, but we'll get to that. So Michelle can't go with them when they leave the castle. Just like Subspecies 2, this picks up right where the last one left off. In fact, there's a little bit of last time on Subspecies where Becky is narrating, hey, here's everything that happened. My sister got bit by a vampire. I went looking for her. Here's this guy, Mel. There was a professor that we liked, and he got murdered. And also there was Detective Marin, or Lieutenant Marin, who is the local Bucharest police. All these people are essentially out here trying to hunt for my sister, who, by the way, is a vampire. It turns out there's this mummy/mother, and she's a real pill, although not exactly a vampire, and they sort of talk about that more in this movie. And anyway, so they have a big showdown, and Radu gets stabbed in the heart, and the mummy gets set on fire, and Michelle just has to stay in the castle overnight, and Becky and Mel are going to go hang out in town and wait for sunset so that they can get Michelle out of there. And of course, at the end of Subspecies 2, Mummy, the charred remains of Mummy, pops up out of nowhere and grabs Michelle and yanks her back into the castle. And where we pick up is where that has happened, because it is daytime. And one of the things that's interesting about this, although they play a little fast and loose with it, is that during daytime, a vampire is just sort of dead. That you can pick them up and smack them in the face and move them around, and they're not going to wake up. Although there are a couple of points, like with a bit where Radu and Michelle are watching the sunrise, where, you know, there's an idea that, well, maybe there's a little bit of leeway at dusk and dawn. You just have to be careful or something. Anyway, doesn't matter. So the mummy grabs Michelle, drags her downstairs in the basement, where she has also brought her son. She opens up a vein on Michelle to feed Radu, to bring him back to life, because, look, we've tried a number of ways to kill him, but just stabbing him in the chest just ain't gonna do it. And that's how we tried it at the end of Subspecies 2, and we knew that wasn't gonna happen. Although, there's a pretty good double death at the end of this one that I am curious how they're going to work around. How Ted Nicolau is going to, try to convince me that Radu can come back from this one. And anyway, doesn't matter. So, Radu comes back to life. He is pissed at Michelle, but still it has the hots for her. And this is the movie where he says, I have sacrificed everything for you. We'll get to it a little bit later, but he ends up murdering everyone in his family. And he says he does it all for her, but let's face it, he killed his father before he ever knew there was a Michelle. So I feel like this is a little bit of pillow talk, even though it doesn't happen during pillow talk time. And so Redu and Michelle and Mummy the witch are all in the basement. They're all, and again, Mummy is like, Redu, will you please, for the love of God and all that's holy, kill this woman? She is ruining all of our plans. She is going to be the death of you. She's going to be the death of me. Knock it off. And Redu is like, no. She is my fledgling. So he is all in on Michelle. Of course, they need to get away. So they do this thing. It's a really weird scene where we've seen them travel sort of by shadow, right? Like that's kind of Redu's gig, is that he, you see a shadow on the wall and then it moves and then bingo bango, Redu is somewhere else. Except this time, all three of them are doing it. Mummy, Redu, and Michelle. Michelle is screaming as though this is painful. Mummy and Redu are both chanting in this way that is really loud, and it might be Latin, might be, Romanian, who knows. But it's loud enough that it is just this horrible cacophony. Smoke is going everywhere, lights are flashing, and then all of a sudden they are gone and off to some other place. Meanwhile, Becky and Mel have brought the police. The police find the body of the professor who died in the last one. And they're exploring the place when Michelle and Mummy and Redu take off. There's a big sparking, smoke billowing kind of affair, and all of the police run out, and Lieutenant Mary is like, oh, we better call the bomb squad. And Becky, who is apparently completely tuned into vampire happenings now, is like, bull to the shit. That is not what's going on here. It is Michelle and Redu and Mummy escaping, because I could hear Michelle screaming. And so we've got to find them. And Marin, by the way, still not convinced there is such a thing as vampires. All of that happens, and then we get to the real wheel spinning of this movie, where it's a lot of Redu trying to get Michelle to agree to be with him for eternity, her wanting to just be destroyed. A couple of times in the movie, she asks him, like, just in this nightmare, I don't want to be a vampire, I hate this, just destroy me. And Redu's counter-argument is, this is a human emotion that you're feeling, you're not a human being anymore. Although I'm saying this more succinctly and more elegantly, I think, than Redu ever says it in the movie. But he says, look, this is just the lingering effects of humanity. And once you get past this, you are going to find that life can be amazing because you have these incredible powers. And, you just need to stop thinking like a human being. You need to start thinking like a vampire. And at one point she asks him, what can kill a vampire? And you feel like, well, this is going to be the thing where he tells her there's this specific thing that vampires can absolutely not come back from. But he just says lots of things. Don't. ago, so it's reasonable for her to have a freak out thinking about Radu having her captive and, the mummy character running its withered hands over her body and so forth. And she just starts freaking out and is like, I can't do this. And that's really interesting if there was an arc to her character where she was trying to basically put this to rest, right? Like, she needs to destroy Radu because knowing that he is out there, knowing the thing that he did to her is still lingering in her memory. Not just memory. I mean, again, this should only happen a couple of days ago in the world of the film, that to destroy him is to gain her power back. But that's not the kind of movie we're making. She ends up not really being a damsel in distress, but is not that kind of character, right? Like, she's not front and center at the end of this movie, really. They do get a CIA guy on board who doesn't last long, but he does get him into this castle way up high where our villains have retreated to lick their wounds and, for Michelle to come around to being a vampire for realsies. And so Mel and this guy breach the castle. They get captured pretty quickly. Actually, Mummy throws a knife at the CIA guy, stabs him in the skull. He's dead. And then Mel is trapped. And at a certain point, Radu is trying to get Michelle to feed on Mel, once again sort of severing these ties with her humanity, even though she doesn't really know Mel, but he knows her. And there's a great moment where he's like, Miss Morgan, how about you let me go? Your sister really wants to talk to you. And Michelle is like, there is an interesting movie where her priorities and her life, or unlife, such as it is, has put her in such a different place that the idea of being reasoned with that way just no longer matters. That, she has bigger fish to fry, so to speak. And the movie just doesn't really do anything with that. And there are so many moments. That's the frustrating thing about this movie, Bloodlust, Subspecies III. The thing that is frustrating about this film is that there are plenty of moments where something really interesting could be done with these characters and with this setting and the situation. And instead, Nicolau tends to go for the easy thing here, which is just, hey, we're going to make a comment about this and then just move on and not really make it part of the characters and not really make it part of the theme of the movie, which would make it interesting. And that the thing that's frustrating about that is those ideas are flirted with. It's not like they're completely absent from the movie. They're just way underbaked because, hey, we need to get to the next plot point or the next scene with Radu drooling blood and telling Michelle how he's done everything for her. It's like, we've seen that, do something more interesting, especially with this Becky character that is such a, paper thin character to begin with. Having her have some sort of role to play in the story other than just being Michelle's sister. Michelle has interesting stuff to do. Like, Michelle is easily the most interesting character in the films overall, because she doesn't want to be a vampire, but she has these urges, and sometimes they get the better of her, and she feels terrible about that. And when she feeds, sometimes she'll try to throw up the blood that she's drinking. Like, there's stuff like that is interesting about the character, and Radu is more pitiable in this, especially because he ends up having to kill Mummy, who wants to destroy Michelle, and he just kills her instead. Like Mummy is coming at Michelle with a knife. He grabs her and literally rips her arm off, then rips her head off. And while the decapitated head is giving him the business, he just throws the head into the fire and destroys her. And that's the point where he says, I've killed every living family member for you, fledgling. What will you do for me? And she's like, you know what? I will give you forgiveness. I will forgive you for what you did to me. And he says, there is no forgiveness for all the things I have done. And you're like, okay, well, this is an interesting turn for Radu. Oh, wait, now the CIA guy or Mel is just going to pipe off and we're going to ruin a moment that could be actually interesting and illuminating about the character. Okay, fair enough. And so the radio blares on Mel's hip, and it's Becky talking to both Mel and also to Michelle, saying, hey, I know you're there. Please let Mel go. Come with us. And at this point, Michelle says to Radu, I need to go talk to her. I will let her go. You have to promise not to hurt her. And if you make that promise, then I will be devoted to you. And he ultimately lets her go. But then, of course, Michelle sort of crawdads Radu a little bit. And it ends up with once more a situation where Radu is trying to get Michelle to destroy her sister. And this time around, there is a bullet, or there's a gun with a bunch of silver bullets in it. Apparently, that not only kills werewolves, it kills vampires. And so Michelle ends up getting that gun away from Becky and destroys Radu, shoots him a bunch of times and kills him, shoots him in the head with a silver bullet. And that seems to, murder him in this moment. And so everyone's dead except for Mel, Becky, Michelle, who is, undead, and a town girl that they've managed to save. And they're all running out of the castle. Daylight is coming up, and Michelle's freaking out, so they're having to wrap her up, and they've got to get her to safety or to a dark place so that she can rest and not be burned alive. And then out comes Radu looking for the Bloodstone. Mel says, oh, well, you want the Bloodstone? Go get it, and tosses it over the side of the castle. Radu goes after it and ends up catching fire because, daylight is coming. And then he falls onto a tree. It's a real, like, Dracula has risen from the grave thing, where it's daylight and he gets stabbed through the chest on a tree. And it's like, oh, double dead. And so he's literally burning alive, like gooey stuff dripping off of his bones. As grab the Bloodstone, and then it kind of flares red, and that's the end of the movie, implying that they're going to bring Radu back some kind of way, although I don't know how, because he was a burning corpse, and not just like the mummy burning corpse, like there is bone and just puddles, and that is all that is left of Radu. But I am sure they will find some way to kind of reconstitute Radu for the sequel, which I do not recall. I may have seen Subspecies 4, but that's not what I remember. I don't know that I've seen it. And there, like I said, we're building up to a fifth one that is going to happen, or just happened this year. It's a 2023 film, which blows my mind, right? Like, they made a Subspecies film this year. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this. Anyway, more complaints about Bloodlust, Subspecies 3. Man, this is the most frustrating one of the lot. The others are, they're very silly, they're very schlocky. That's fine. I'm totally fine with a schlocky vampire movie. I'm on board with it. This movie is frustrating because it starts to hint at deeper ideas about these characters, about, the PTSD that Becky is suffering through, that Michelle is conflicted and just wants to be destroyed, that Radu has found some emotional awakening due to his relationship with Michelle. And again, I'm making this all sound better than it really is. These are things that are sort of touched on. It's like a butterfly landing on the movie, these ideas, and then it flits away before it can impact anything in the story, which is a bummer, because there's just not enough story for the characters not to be explored a little bit more. Most of the story is, hey, where's Michelle? Oh, there she is. And now it's the same shit as the last movie, where she's a vampire, she wants to die, Radu doesn't want her to die, he wants her to eat other people. Like, that's what we saw in Subspecies 2. We're just, the end of this and the end of Subspecies 2 are too similar to not do something else along the way that makes the ride worthwhile. That being said, I still sort of like things about this movie. I think this is the weakest of the three so far. I mean, obviously it kind of goes 1, 2, 3 in order of how much I would recommend them as of right now, even though Subspecies 2 is probably more fun than 1, but 1's a little more coherent, and despite the opening of it looking